Good morning and welcome to Member Focus Monday. I'm Christina Schaefer, Director of Social Media for HAR, and I'm joined this morning by a familiar face to many, HAR's political consultant, Daniel Gonzalez. Welcome to the program, Daniel.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate you. I love this program. I try to always log in every Monday and when I can.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate that. We have a lot to discuss as we recap the local, state, and national results of the 2022 election. And we're going to get into all of that. But before we do, I just wanted to make a quick announcement that this week's HAR On the Move podcast and Member Focus Monday are sponsored by Artavia, a new home community in Conroe. We will take a look towards the end at a quick video that they sent over. Daniel, I know this is your second appearance on our program, but for anyone who didn't get to see you the first time around, will you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you do?
Oh, sure. Daniel Gonzalez. I'm just a lonely lobbyist here in Austin, Texas. But for about 19 and a half years, nearly 20 years, I was a chief lobbyist for the Texas Association of Realtors. And for the past 3 years, I've had my own consulting lobbying firm. And I'm so glad and grateful to also be helpful to the Houston Association of Realtors from a local perspective when it comes to issues as well as politics.
Wonderful, and we thank you for that. So let's just dive into it. One thing that we sometimes hear about are voting patterns. So did people's voting patterns change in this election as far as when they voted or how they voted?
I think not really. I mean, if you just look at, well, I guess the answer to that question kind of is multi-pronged. It depends on where you are, but I think overall, I think what you saw is that people still came out and voted. Those who like to early vote, they came out and early voted. Those who like to wait for on election day, they waited on election day. I think what you saw overall, though, is a lower percentage of folks statewide in Texas that did come out. We had about 8.1, just shy of 8.1 million people, but we have 17.7 million registered voters. So if my math is correct, it's about 45, 46% participation that came out, which is down from 2 years ago. But again, this was a midterm versus, a presidential year. But if you look at 4 years ago during the other midterm, I believe we're actually up in terms of total voter participation.
Okay, well, good to know. So were there any surprises in Texas? Any outcomes that you thought were a surprise?
No, not for me, but certainly depends on who you ask that question of. If you were some folks who were going for some candidates who thought they could really do great from a statewide basis, you probably were surprised. But I wasn't surprised. I think, look, the state of Texas is a Republican state. It's been a Republican state for nearly 25, 30 years. Texas Democrats, they have tried and tried and tried to break through from a statewide level. But I think the last time they actually held a statewide office, it was either 1992 or 94. So it's been a really long time. So I
Mm-hmm.
think they really need to kind of do a deep dive into who they are as a party and what those issues are for them
Mm-hmm.
as a party. But I think one thing that they really should concentrate on too is what happens at the national level in terms of issues. They don't always translate down here to Texas as well.
Right.
Um, Texas is a conservative state, but doesn't mean that Democrats can't break through, but they just haven't been able to find that winning strategy, winning message for the past 25, 30 years.
So, on the topic of the issues, what were the key issues that impacted the election in Texas?
Well, again, I think from a national perspective, I think a lot of those issues that, well, Democrats were obviously using the Dobbs decision, abortion access, to abortion as a big issue. Uh, they used MAGA, against the Republicans. That the Republicans have gone too far right.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a Republican, you certainly looked at the economy. You looked at inflation. What's who was it back in the '90s? It's the economy, stupid. It's just that is the kitchen table issue for a lot of folks, a lot of voters, and I think Republicans had a winning message overall. However, I think if you look just from a national perspective, just 10 months ago, there was talk of the Republicans were going to do this red wave. They were going to take
Mm-hmm.
over Congress. and it really didn't happen. We really didn't see that. They did certainly make some strides, in some certain areas, but Democrats, held off, in other areas as well. Arizona, Nevada, we have a Georgia runoff, that's going
Hmm.
to happen next month. So, really kind of a mixed bag of results. Then you look here in Texas, you know, those issues, crime, the economy, property taxes, things of that sort, were what immigration, border security, all of those issues really worked well for Republicans.
Okay. So that was kind of my next question is why do you think that Democrats performed so well in other states but not in Texas?
Wow, that's a really great question, Christina. I wish I knew the answer, to be honest with you, but I think what happens is I think I would probably say that complacency, certainly gets in the way. I think a lot of times where Democrats they do well, they try to do well, they have a game plan per se, they have money, but when you look at the money that comes in from both sides, I mean, as an great example, the Republicans put tons of money in South Texas
Hmm.
to try to win three congressional seats. They ultimately won one. Republicans did, but they kind of put the flag in the ground, if you will, that they're going to try to compete for Hispanic voters.
Hmm.
Not saying Democrats didn't have a plan, but I think they were kind of maybe caught off guard with the amount of financial resources that were being thrown around this state.
Okay. So let's talk about some of your biggest takeaways from Tuesday night. And we can start nationally, then talk about state, then talk a little bit more locally. So, what were some of your biggest takeaways?
Yeah, sure. Again, from the national perspective, if you look at what was supposed to happen versus 10 months ago, 6 months ago versus what actually happened,
Hmm.
it really is interesting. Uh, if you look at the U.S. Senate, it's projected right now that the Democrats will have 50 seats in the Senate. As I mentioned earlier, Georgia, there will be one runoff between Senator Warnock and Herschel Walker. And it's really interesting because, again, as I mentioned, 10 months ago, earlier this year, the Republicans were just supposed to sweep, both the House and the Senate, but it just didn't happen. So it's really interesting that Leader McConnell will not be able to be the majority leader as he was planning on, probably, on election night. But
Hmm.
if you look at the House too, here we are, almost a week later, and we still don't have final resolution. Now it looks like Republicans will get back control of the U.S. House. Right now, with the graphic on the screen, 210 Democrats versus 214. You need 218 to have control. So I think Republicans will take it, but it's going to be really slim majority.
Hmm.
Maybe they get 219, 220, 221. But again, 218 is your magic number. So again, 10 months ago, there was some talk of 30, 40, 50 seats that were going to
Hmm.
go to the Republicans, and we just didn't see that. So both chambers are going to be really, really close. Obviously, the vice president and the Senate will have if if Herschel Walker wins in Georgia, it'll be 50-50. If Senator Warnock wins, it'll be 51-49. So the Vice President Harris, won't have to be the tiebreaker, if you will.
Hmm.
But very, very close margin. So what does that mean for the next 2 years? I think not a lot's going to get done. I think there's going to be a lot of acrimony between the both parties, as we have always seen. Maybe some issues, will move forward, but it's gonna take both parties to work together to get those done.
Okay. And then let's talk about the state level. What were your takeaways
Yeah,
there?
yeah. At the state level, again, as I mentioned, about 8.1 million people voted, which is about 46-47% overall.
Hmm.
But if you look at the heat map, what's really interesting is if you look at the heat map for the general election turnout, you can really see where you had 50+% turnout in certain counties. If you look way down there, by Harris County, it was 40 to 49.9% turnout. Montgomery County was 50+%. And then others were below 30%, out there in West Texas. So it's really interesting to see, the turnout, where it's coming from. So I think this heat map really
Hmm.
illustrates that. But then if you just dive into the governor's race,
Hmm.
if you look at where how Greg Abbott did versus Beto. Kind of the same thing. His performance 22 versus in 2018, just 4 years ago. This map shows where he increased his voter turnout or decreased it. So kind of along in that Central Texas area, you see that his overall performance, Governor Abbott's performance, decreased by about 2.5% in the Central Texas area. Up in Dallas, Fort Worth, kind of the same thing. In the Houston area, a little bit, you know, kind of mixed results, if you will. Probably stagnant, maybe increase, maybe decrease just a little bit. But then you look at Beto and what he did from 20 this year versus 2018. Kind of the same thing. You really look at. I would just kind of point your attention to the valley, the border areas. You see his performance from 2018 to 2022, it decreased by about 10% in some of those counties. So those are areas that he really needed to do well in. And I think it really shows you the overall impact of where the Republicans are trying to put their financial resources. And they made some great strides down in the Valley area. But I think again that map really does show you that overall the Democrats really do need to kind of hit the reset button, if you will, and figure
Mhm.
out what those issues can be, and not only for the urban voters but also for the rural voters as well.
Okay, very good. And then locally.
Yeah, locally, it was really interesting to see, what happened in Harris County. Harris County, it is blue. There was tons and tons of money, that was being poured into some of these local races. But I thought I'd just show really quickly, just three counties. I mean, I wish I could put more, but with Harris, Fort Bend, and Montgomery County, if you look at the registered voters versus the number of voters cast, Harris County had about a 43% participation rate of votes cast. Fort Bend just a little bit higher at 48%, and the Montgomery County, right at 51%. Again, just rounding up in those. So I think it was really interesting to see, how voters did come out in just three of our counties, that
Hmm.
that we have in our jurisdiction. But as I mentioned, you had so much money, and obviously the big race in Harris County was the county judges race. I don't even know how much money. It was millions upon millions of dollars. And I just wanted to put this up, but Lena Hidalgo, she did win re-election. Right at 550,000 of votes. To Mueller, right at 532,000. So a lot of money was put in this race, but ultimately Lena Hidalgo, was able to be successful. And if you look up and down the ballot as well, just hit there in Harris County, I don't believe there was one Republican countywide who did win. So you look at a lot of these judges races that were countywide. I believe all the Democrats, did win those.
Okay. So let's move into a little bit the association side of it and kind of looking more directly into real estate. One question that we often get is why do associations like HAR and Texas Realtors, why do they make recommendations on candidates or issues? And how does that decision process work? Who makes those decisions?
Sure. Let me take the second part first.
Hmm.
The great thing about, I think, the organization, whether it's the local or state or even national, it's all volunteer driven. So it's not staff who are making those recommendations. It are volunteers. That come forward. It's our members that are volunteering their time to come forward and participate. In these groups to look at who's running for elected office, look at the incumbents, really pour over their record, if you will, their voting record, and they finally make a determination whether or not this person should get the recommendation, the endorsement, of the organization. So, I think it's a really great process that I'm glad that we have realtors who are willing to participate because we couldn't do it without them. But ultimately, it's their decision, and we just help facilitate those conversations. But and why we do that is because I think ultimately we have an obligation not only to our members but also to the real estate economy and to the public to show and tell them uh, what the voting record is of these folks who are making decisions that ultimately impact our pocketbook,
Hmm.
whether it's on the local property tax rate, whether it's on crime, whether it's on public education, whatever those issues are. We look at those. But I would also say this as well, Christina, that there are so many issues that people want to get involved with, and that's great from their own personal perspective. But you have to look at it from, I guess, our lens, which from the real estate lens. We look at real estate related issues as much as somebody may care about, let's say, abortion as an example. That's a great issue that you may have and you may want to get involved with, but that's not an issue that we have to deal with from a real estate perspective.
Mhm.
If that's an issue that's near and dear to your heart, that's great. There are other organizations who you can participate in with, but we have to really be focused on those real estate related issues that ultimately hit and impact our pocketbook.
Okay. So, that being said, the candidates that were recommended by HAR had great success overall. Can you share a little bit of that with us, those percentages? And secondly, how does that impact the relationship that HAR has with those candidates and potential future legislation?
Yeah, a great question. I think of all the candidates, I think we had 49 or 50 local candidates that we endorsed, and only three of them, lost. One in Harris County, I believe, one in Missouri City, and I can't remember where the other one is, but I think it was only three. So from a percentage standpoint, we did really, really well. And again, I think it shows the impact of what our members who do volunteer for these committees. I mean, they really do a great
Mm-hmm.
job of looking at the voting record of these folks, and we make sure that people understand that these are just our recommended candidates. But obviously, when a person goes into the voting booth and whoever they vote for, that's up to them. We can merely just make a recommendation of who you should vote for.
Okay, great. We had just, I believe, one question that came in so far and a couple comments, but if you do have a question for Daniel, go ahead and type those in and we will get to those. A question from Adrian here. Do you think that redistributing hurts Democratic voters more than Republican voters?
I think, Adrian, you're talking about the redistricting
Mm-hmm.
of all the districts. I think it really depends on who has the pencil. To be honest with you, because from a state perspective, I think a lot of Democrats on election night and the next day and the day after. In fact, I think there's a Texas Democrat memo that was put out Thursday or Friday of last week that says redistricting acts absolutely work from a state perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at a local perspective, it actually worked really well for the county commissioners because they drew one of the districts to be more blue, and sure enough, that did happen. So from a county commissioner standpoint, now I think we're 4-1 here in Harris County. So it depends on who holds the pencil and the paper whenever you're redistricting those lines, but it works. They know what they're doing. But I think it only works, Adrian, because the people that they put in these districts who are registered voters but aren't voting, those people, if they decided to vote, the makeup of these districts could be dramatically shifted to something different. So it redistricting only works because people fail to participate in the process. I maintain that if voters voted at a higher propensity, uh, what we see right now in terms of R or versus D districts really could be changed. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So, all in all, we talked about some of the recommendations that were made here locally and at the state. Do you believe the results of the election will impact the real estate industry going forward?
Oh, no doubt, absolutely. I think it does, not only in this election, but I think it has, obviously in past elections as well. You have to remember the folks that we are electing, whether it's at the local level, state level, even national level. These men and women, they all make decisions that will impact us one way or another. Now, granted, you could say a congressional decision may have a little less influence on our everyday lives, but I can say from a local perspective, those decisions that whether it's Lena Hidalgo or Mayor Turner or anyone else, they absolutely can impact how we live our lives at the on a daily level. So that's why I think it's very, very important, that we do exercise our right to vote. And I think, 40% again, of voters who participated in Harris County, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we would love to see 60%, 70%, participation, if not higher.
Yeah. Completely agree with you there. So, going back to the national coverage a little bit, what do you think some of the outcomes will be? You've already shared a little bit about this, but why is that Georgia election so important?
Well, I think it's important because, again, well, it became less important, I guess, on Saturday or Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to Saturday or Sunday, I think with Nevada still out there, uh, there was some speculation that maybe the Republican in Nevada would be the winner. Didn't happen that way. So prior to that coming out, Georgia. I mean, all eyes and minds were on Georgia. I mean, you may still act. We may see. I mean, tons and I mean millions of dollars that get pumped into that race, into that state. But I think with Nevada and with that going to the Democrat, now that Democrats do have 50 votes, in the Senate. Sure, if Democrats can add one more, so they have 51-49, that's
Mm-hmm.
great. But even if they lose Georgia, it'll be 50-50, and then Vice President Harris will have the tiebreaker vote. So they would still retain control of the Senate.
Okay. Great, thank you. So, as a reminder, this week's Member Focus Monday and HR on the Move podcast are sponsored by Artavia, a new home community in Conroe. They did send over a short video that we're going to watch, and then we're going to come back with more questions for Daniel. So, let's take a look at that. So thank you again to Artavia for sponsoring this week's program. Daniel, we have a few people thanking you in the comments. Thank you for the info. They really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you want to share with our audience today?
Well, the last thing I would say is this: that thank you to all the realtors, who do come out and vote. I think realtors overall have a propensity that are three times more likely to go vote. Thank you for your participation, not only in the process, but also in our internal process as well. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, Christina, we couldn't do it without our volunteer leadership, and we really, really do rely on them. And I know they're very busy, especially in this market. But we just appreciate you very, very much when you do volunteer your time and your efforts.
Thank you. And we have Peggy, actually. I know you know Peggy Pentecost just thanked you in the
Oh
comments,
yeah,
as well as Antonio Salinas. So we do
awesome.
appreciate that. And we appreciate you, Daniel. And I did also, as you were mentioning, our volunteer leaders are so important. A reminder that the Get Involved campaign is taking place right now. Please look at hr.com/get involved. Take a look at the groups that are available. And of course, there are several that have to do with politics. We have the governmental affairs, political affairs, and also all of the local PAL groups. So take a look at those and get involved. I did want to, I see Peggy said our gag committee says vote, and we definitely agree with that. I did want to also note that we will not have a Member Focus Monday for the next 2 weeks as we celebrate the Thanksgiving holiday. So we will be back on December 5th with HAR Director Mike Wong talking about safety, realtor safety, and especially realtor safety throughout the holiday season. So be sure to tune in for that one on December 5th. Daniel, thank you so much again for your time today.
No, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
You too, and have a great week, everyone, and have a safe and happy Thanksgiving. Bye-bye.